what smart families do to shield wealth from lawsuits and creditors. You can have a trust and still lose everything if it's not designed properly. Why? Because not all trusts are built to protect assets. And if you're thinking that that's a priority for you, today's talk is going to be, I think, impactful for you, hopefully getting you to ask some better questions. So a few lines of legalese can change the structure of a trust. It's really just a couple of words here and there that can make a big difference for you.
Yeah, trusts can be really important tools. They've clearly become more complicated, more abundant in the number of types of trusts that exist, which then just makes having the knowledge to have the right one and the understanding of the one that you have, even more important.
Not to mention, as we said earlier, having the right counsel advising you and drafting you, and again, asking the right questions is imperative. So as advisors who've worked with lots of clients about whether trust, whether it's for asset protection or otherwise, we think it's really, really important what makes sense, what is airtight, and what has a lot of holes. So too many, I think, high net worth families believe that just having any old trust is going to be adequate. And as we talked about before, I think the lack of knowledge of trust is so difficult because a trust is such a broad term. It can mean so many things. And it's not whether you have a trust, it's how is your specific trust drafted relative to the rules of society and creditors and lawsuits and whatnot.
I think it starts with being crystal clear on what you're trying to accomplish. What do you need a trust for? What is the motivation for you even exploring that avenue? Once you have clarity, then you can speak to a professional about creating and designing a trust that is going to effectively fill that need.
Is it possible, would you say, to think you need a trust and not need one after you've sought counsel? And I think that's a very important distinction for you.
I've always said trusts kind of look a lot better on paper than they do in real life. They look great on paper. Then when you have to execute them, there's costs, there's complexities, there's trustee issues, things change. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying that you have to eyes wide open. When you create a trust and fund a trust, you have to really understand what you're doing.
And to protect assets, you also need the right state. You need the right structure of the trust. There's a lot of questions. And be willing to give up control. So you wouldn't put all of your assets typically.
I say it all the time, forever is a really long time. And when something's irrevocable, that's essentially forever.
Yeah, what we don't want you to do is actually need it and then ask the questions after the...
Put in all that work, time, money, effort, and it didn't work.
There are certain industries, suppose you own an explosives company. I mean, there's huge risk. Or if you own a coal mine, or there's lots of businesses that are highly litigious. People can get hurt, people can get killed, and you might need to protect yourself, and there might be reasons to do this. So we'll talk about those today.
This video is for educational purposes only. Always consult professionals before making legal, tax, and investment decisions.
According to the American Academy of Estate Planners, 19 states currently offer what's called domestic asset protection trusts. And these are trusts to protect your assets from creditors. As we mentioned, you would put the money in, you would lose some control, but you may be able to get some asset protection if, in fact, you do own a dynamite company and a stick of dynamite gets misplaced.
Or if you're a neurosurgeon or a surgeon where you're at risk of being sued for negligence.
What this means, if it's 19 states allow it now, that probably means then there's going to be 30 states, then there's going to be 35 states. We'll probably get somewhere to 47 or 40 states. I doubt. It always seems like you never get to all 50 states. But it's not just a luxury. It's an increasingly accessible tool for people, especially those high net worth people who have higher risk profiles. But again, we want to warn you, understand what it is you're trying to protect. So let's talk about what makes a trust protective and why the devil's in the details. So when you look at an airtight or bulletproof trust, what does it mean? I mean, those aren't legal terms. Those are just terms that are used to talk about the inability for a creditor to access those funds. Now, what does that mean? Let's say that I'm driving down the road and I'm going 70 miles an hour in a 25 mile an hour zone, and I hit Sam with my car and I hurt him really badly. He would then turn around and sue me. And if he sued me for $5 million and my auto insurance only is good for $250,000. Who's going to pay the rest of the money? Well, he's going to sue me and he'll try to take my home. He'll try to take my bank accounts, my investment accounts, my business, whatever it may be, my car.
And I will hire counsel that specialize in finding assets to attach essentially themselves to for their clients.
So the asset protection is to make those unavailable to creditors. So if he were to get a judgment is the gavel. When the gavel goes down and he says, I owe Sam Marrella $5 million because I hit him with my car speeding in a 25-mile-an-hour zone. If there's assets that he can't legally touch because they're not deemed to be mine, that's where the asset protection comes into play. So if I had all my assets in a domestic asset protection trust, the likelihood is that he wouldn't be able to garner or garnish those assets. So when we talk about bulletproof, airproof, we want to try to keep those assets from being accessible in such a lawsuit from creditors, or that could even be estate disputes.
There's nothing that's truly bulletproof though, however, right?
Right. Nothing is invincible, and you just want to make it as highly resistant as you can. And I think the next step, looking at the misconceptions, people often think that a private trust is actually a protected trust. And that's not true. It all depends on the terms of the trust. And undoubtedly in a $5 million case, it would go to court and the judge would have to deem that whether it was a protected asset or a not protected asset. So it never matters until the gavel swings down.
Yeah, and the hard thing for you in that lawsuit example is that for you to have the protection of those $5 million, you would have given up a lot of control of those $5 million for a long period of time. And that's the constant give or take as to if they make sense, where they make sense type of thing.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be an accident. It could be a divorce. It could be a creditors from a bad, business gone bad or something like that. When you look at the elements, let's talk about some of the elements of an asset protection trust. One, it would have to be irrevocable. Irrevocable means I can't revoke it. I can't change it. So there, almost by definition, you are losing control. The protection increases when you have an irrevocable trust, but it, of course, doesn't go away. You need an independent trustee. So you need an independent third party who is deemed to follow the terms of the trust so that I can't say, hey, I want to buy a new sports car. Can you give me $100,000? I may not be able to do that. I might be able to get a car allowance. I might be able to do a number of different things, but I'm not going to have unfettered access to the money.
And if you're able to do it, you probably don't have the protection that you thought you had.
That's right. And then what's the next thing? What about beneficiaries, saying, hey, I'm going to get this trust someday. Why don't you give me, can I loan money against that now? Or will you give me money against that now? So there would have to be things like that. The next aspect is jurisdiction. We talked about it before. Nevada and South Dakota are two primary, but there are other jurisdictions that allow this. And again, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish, where you live, where your assets are held, as to what you want to do.
So the key point is you don't have to live in those states to set up your trust in that state. Again, the term is situs. The situs can be in another state than where you live.
Correct. And the next tip is, we say this all the time, if you're going to engage into some aspect of asset protection trust, you need to hire an asset protection attorney, probably would also be an estate planning attorney and or an elder care attorney, to make sure that your trusts are actually going to protect you from those evils that you're trying to protect it from. Another important note is there's something called fraudulent conveyances. And so suppose I hit Sam in the car, he wins a judgment against me for $5 million, and I take all of my assets and I give them to my kids. That would be called a fraudulent conveyance. So I would have to transfer my assets before I hit him with the car to be able to do that. So sometimes once the issue happens, it's too late. So we can't
Monday morning quarterback that one.
Then you look at what kind of property can you use? Can you use financial assets or a business? And again, it all depends on what you're trying to do. The most important thing we can ever say with any of the issues that we cover on these videos is we need to get you to ask the right questions. We can always find the people with the answers, but if we're not asking the right questions, it won't matter. So this is all educational to allow you to think about, what do we need? How can I learn from these videos for what my wife and I, or whoever it may be, need to address, and what aspects, what risks are we trying to avoid? So the trade-offs, we kind of touched on them before. You lose control, they're complex, and they're costly. independent trustee equals fees, right? No independent trustee works for free. They're usually highly skilled, and they can be relatively expensive, and they could cost you 1% of the assets.
Yeah, and you can find people to do it less expensively. You can find family, but are they going to do it the right way, and is it going to work when it needs to work?
Yeah,
and that,
you can't. I don't think it's a place to save money.
I don't either.
Right.
If you have the money to put money into a trust like that, you got to pay to make sure it's done properly.
Complexity and cost, as we said again, they're not plug and play. They're not easy. It's not something you can talk to an attorney for 20 minutes and get set up, because it has to be specific to your particular case. You may own businesses, you may own horses, who knows? But you've got to tailor this to you. So we need the right assets. Not every asset can go in there. So we need to figure out what makes the most sense, if anything. So what do you do next? First thing is ask yourself, what is it that you're trying to protect and from what? And then you assess whether your current plan accomplishes those goals. And if not, what is it that you want to accomplish? Once you figure out what you want to accomplish, then we have to seek counsel to engage to be able to draft such a trust. Whether it's even doable or not in any of these states
What's the best trust? What's the best state based on your goals to fix the problem?
Who's the trustee? Who are the beneficiaries going to be? So you're going to need to coordinate this with estate planning attorneys, your financial people, your accountants, your tax accountants, I should say.
It's a much more sophisticated level of tax. You may even have to beef up the tax
Especially
preparers
for
in your
high
life.
net worth individual with complicated. The higher net worth you are and the more complicated or complex your estate is, the more help you're going to need, the more layers of professionals you're going to need to do this. So the best protection planning isn't just about shielding your wealth. It's about preserving what you've built for the people that you care most about. High net worth families understand that losing some control is worth it. Some do not. It all depends. But sometimes surrendering part of the control is worth it for the peace of mind of knowing that you've got some level of asset protection.
Making a trust bulletproof often involves choosing between revocable and irrevocable structures, a critical distinction for any family. We break down the pros and cons of each in this next video. Click here to watch the video to learn how to cover the basics.